Hello, apes students. I'm going to be giving you your Module 11 lecture notes, which are about soil properties. Let's just get right into it. Um, our contents here, so we got six sections that we're going to be getting through. The first is about how soil is formed, soil formation, and then we'll get into properties of soil, both the chemical and physical properties of soil. Then we got to get into soil types and the characteristics of those different soil types, something called soil horizons, which is kind of different layers in soil, and then how soil differs in when across biomes, how the different biomes will affect the soil properties. So we're going to begin with soil formation and answering the question, how is soil formed? We have two components of soil, and one is the parent rock material. So this is the first ingredient of it. Rock gets broken down into much finer pieces, and we have two ways that this can happen. This is through physical weathering. One way is physical weathering, which is wind and water. That's just erosion. In our main erosive forces are wind and water. There are some other ones like glaciers retreating and that ice grinding on the rock. The main ones you want to know are wind and water, that are breaking down that rock very slowly. This picture right here shows, I actually don't know if it's wind or water eroded. There's no water around it. That doesn't mean there wasn't water around it once, but you can see how it's been worn away in these kind of patterns. So that's these forces that are breaking down that rock. The other thing we have is chemical weathering. And if we look at this picture right here, we have these pock marks in the rock. That's not been done by wind or water. That's been some chemical reaction, some acid probably, that's been breaking down the rock into soluble compounds. And that's important because when rock gets solubilized, when it becomes dissolved, when you can dissolve it in water, then plants can absorb it. An example of that is of the completely natural reaction of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere with rainwater, and that forms carbonic acid, which is a weak acid. This is why all rainfall is actually slightly acidic. You've heard of acid rain before, but even like normal rain is a little bit acidic because of the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And so maybe that's due to this. Some water building up and that acid breaking down. There are also reactions, biotic reactions. Lichens can release slightly acidic compounds, and that can break down rock. The reason this is generally very important is because that parent rock material is very rich in inorganic nutrients, in those kind of like earth metals. So if you think of the periodic table, think of like the metals. So I've mentioned iron and calcium as examples of that. That would also be true of calcium, of sodium, of magnesium. Parent rock material has these minerals in it, and they need to be released into the soil so that they can become accessible to plants to promote plant growth. So that's one component, is our parent rock material. The other ingredient of soil is organic material, and that is stuff, plants, animals, fungi, whatever, mostly plants, that have lived and died and been broken down. And of course, things that were alive are very rich in nutrients as well. Because anything that's alive has cell membranes, has proteins, and those things have nitrogen and phosphorus in them. So breaking down that organic matter is particularly beneficial to replenish nitrogen and phosphorus, to cycle nitrogen and phosphorus back into the soil. This is a biotic process. So decomposers do this, bacteria do this, fungi do this, and earthworms are wonderful soil builders. They're able to eat through organic matter, and the waste they create is very rich in nutrients, particularly nitrogen compounds. So these are the two ways that soil is formed. Soil is some combination of weathered rock material and broken down organic material. So now we're into number 2, which is chemical properties of soil. Notice here I have property number 1. I'm going to go through 3 chemical properties. There are far more than 3 chemical properties of soil, but we are going to be mostly concerned about these 3 that I'm going to go through. And one is pH. Hopefully you guys are all familiar with pH. A pH of 7, which is what water generally is, like pure water is, that is neutral. And generally, that's what you want soils to be. Because plants have a certain range of tolerance for acidity or alkalinity. So if you recall from your pH scale, the higher it up is up on the pH scale, the more alkaline or basic it is, and the lower it is, the more acidic it is. But because all plants have this range of tolerance, if soils get too acidic or soils get too alkaline, plant growth will be negatively impacted. And at a certain point, all plants will die. At a certain point, plants cannot survive at a pH that is completely outside its range of tolerance. So if we look at this map over here, we see that look at like around the equator. So like our rainforest, here's Amazon, here's Congo rainforest, here's like that rainforest here. And then up here, these are other forest bands, deciduous forest, taiga up here. Forests tend to get more rainfall. And what we generally see, there are exceptions to this, but what we generally see is that areas that get more rainfall will have more acidic soils. And that's because, as I mentioned before, rainfall is slightly acidic. And so that will drop the pH a little bit. Obviously, in the rainforest, it's not dropping it so much that the plants are not able to thrive. And the plants in these rainforests where there is more acidic soil will have a range of, will have a range of tolerance that will be able to tolerate these slightly acidic soils. And what we see where we have more basic soils, where we have blue over here, the alkaline soils. Look, we got deserts here, Sahara Desert into the Gobi Desert here. Here's the American Southwest. These are very arid regions down here in South America. This is the Kalahari Desert down here. This is the outback. In those arid regions, you tend to have more basic soils. And that's because those soils are more composed of the parent rock material, because not that much stuff grows. So you can't have that much organic material that's being broken down. So in deserts, you have a lot of parent rock. And parent rock is will have higher concentrations of those alkali metals. Think of the periodic table on the left-hand side, groups 1 and 2. Those are your alkali metals, the potassiums, the calciums, the sodiums, the magnesium. Alkali metals will make soils more alkaline. And so those will tend to raise the pH. And that's sort of why we see these general trends. There are a few other things, granite and shale. If you have areas where the parent rock is granite and shale, those kind of leach acids and those will drop your pH. Limestone, calcium carbonate, will neutralize acidic soil. So that will raise the pH. There's, so like coral is made of calcium carbonate. So there are, a bunch of islands that are old coral material, and those will resist acidity a lot because of that calcium carbonate. So just a few good notes to write down, I would especially be sure you know about that limestone. Limestone is a very good soil neutralizer, will raise the pH. Moving on to property number 2 is nitrogen. Nitrate, essential. Here's remember our nitrogen cycle from our nutrient cycles here. Nitrate is an essential nutrient for plant growth. There's our nitrate right there. So if you have healthy soils and you want to promote primary productivity, NPP, you want to promote plant growth, you need to have nitrate in the soil. So how does nitrate get in the soil? Well, it's made available through fixation. Remember, most of the nitrogen in the world is in the atmosphere. So Nitrogen fixation will pull it down into the soil where it can then go through nitrification and be converted into nitrate. Other big reservoirs of nitrogen are in organic living things. Animals and plants, we contain a bunch of nitrogen, so we need to cycle that back into the soils, and we do that through our waste. Animals do that through our waste, and all living things do it through death and decomposition, and they'll return it to ammonia as well, where it can be nitrified, turned into nitrate, which will be assimilated into plants. So that's how nitrogen gets, is the main way nitrogen gets added into the soil, through biotic processes, through organic matter and fixation. Now, a good note about fixation, the majority of fixation is done through a biotic process by bacteria, but there is abiotic fixation. Lightning strikes. Lightning is powerful enough that it can break apart an N2 molecule. N2 in the atmosphere has a triple bond together. That's why it's so difficult to break apart. Only these special microbes can do it, but it's very tight. They're very tightly bound together, but lightning is strong enough that it can crack that bond and oxidize it and make it available to organisms in the soil. And pH and ammonia are connected. Ammonia raises the pH. Ammonia sort of behaves like alkali metals. If you remember like ionic bonds in chemistry, ammonia is this compound that basically behaves like a metal. It's a cation, and that raises the soil pH. So places where there's a lot of ammonia, that can have a basic pH, pH above neutral, above 7. All right, and finally, property number 3 is phosphorus. Phosphate, boom, right there. Also an essential nutrient for plant growth. But if you recall, phosphorus moves super slowly because it doesn't have that atmospheric component. Phosphorus is made available through the weathering of organic material and through the decomposition of plants. So I should have circled weathering right there. Sorry, that should be circled too. And the decomposition of plants, because all living things also have they also have phosphate in them, and so waste has phosphate in it, and the and decomposition will replenish phosphorus into the soil. Sorry, I just wanted to add this circle right here because that's what's going to be adding phosphorus to the soil, also that weathering. But again, phosphorus is rare because weathering is slow. Nitrogen fixation happens all the time, constantly, but the phosphorus that's locked up in rock, it gets released very slowly. So it's often a rare nutrient in soils. So those are the 3 chemical properties that we are going to concern ourselves with. Again, there are many other chemical properties. We could talk about potassium, we could talk about iron, we could talk about all these other nutrients, but the 3 that I want us to focus on are pH, nitrogen, and phosphorus. So now we're getting into physical properties of soil. And again, we have 3 physical properties that we're going to want to get through. Physical property number 1 is permeability. If you remember from biology, learned about the semi-permeable membrane. Permeability means the ability for something to pass through it. And in our case, it's going to be water. So the permeability of soil is how much water can pass through it. This picture is trying to show that. You see water on the top and then water dripping on through. So permeability is the ability of water to infiltrate through the soil. If you remember that process in the water cycle, infiltration, its ability to seep down. And this is, of course, very important because plants can't access it if it can't seep into the soil. So that water needs to be able to infiltrate into the soil. And then the other side of it is if soil is too porous, water will pass right through it so quickly that plants won't be able to grab it, and then those plants won't be getting enough water that way. So you can't have soil that's completely impermeable because water won't soak down into it, and you can't have soil that's too permeable because the water will pass right through and the plants won't be able to get it. So permeability is an important physical characteristic of soil. Moving on to physical property number 2, and this is water holding capacity. This is the ability of soil to absorb and hold water, sort of like a sponge. You can soak your sponge in water and lift it up, and that water will sort of stay held in the sponge. Water can't be accessed by plants if it leaches downward. So basically, if it's too permeable, water can't be accessed by it. So you want your soil to be able to hold on to the water so that the roots have time to access it. You want it to be sort of like a sponge, have this ability to allow water to pass into it, but not through it. It wants to be able to hold on to it. So permeability and water holding capacity are related to each other. And that is property number 2. Property number 3 is aeration. A component of soil is air. There is air in the soil, and there needs to be air in the soil because there's stuff in there that breathes oxygen just like you do. There are the soil microbes, there are the worms, there are the fungi, and there are also the roots of the plants that perform cell respiration that need to be able to access that oxygen in order to perform respiration. So aeration is how much air there is mixed into the soil. Soil that is not well aerated, we describe that as compacted, and that will leave not enough oxygen for the vital biota in the soil, those living organisms, the worms, the bacteria, and all that. There will also be not enough oxygen for the roots to respire, and there won't be room for the roots to actually extend and grow deeper and get down into the soil. So aeration is another one. If it's not aerated enough, it's too compacted, and the roots won't be able to thrive, and the organisms won't be able to thrive either because of lack of oxygen. So those are our physical properties. Now we're getting into our next section, which is soil types. Now we did a little work with this with our lab already. The soil triangle over here has all of our different soil types in it. And the way we determine soil type is by determining how much clay there is, what's the percent clay, what's the percent silt, and what is the percent sand. Well, what are clay, silt, and sand? It's just the size of the particles. That's all that means. So clay are soil particulates that are very, very small, less than 0.002 millimeters, teeny tiny little granules of dirt. Silt is this kind of medium size, and you can see the silt here. The size, it's a little bit bigger than clay, between 0.2 and 0.5 there. There are these different classifications, like whatever. What we need to know is that clay is the smallest particulate, silt is the second smallest, and then look, we have all of these sands. Very fine sand, medium sand, coarse sand, very coarse sand. Well, good news for us is that we will be clumping all of those things together and just calling all of them, whoops, sorry, clear that. All of these things, we're not going to be really distinguishing between the different types of sand. We're just calling all of these sand. And sand is the largest particulate. Sand is the largest pieces there. So what we can do is, when we find out what percentage our soil is of clay, sand, and silt, sorry, I'm struggling to maneuver this thing. There we go. We can determine what our soil type is. And we had practice in this with the lab, but I'm just going to do it again here. So let's say we are told that a soil sample is 30% clay, 20% silt, and 50% sand. So let's go ahead and show how we would do that. We'll start with our 30% clay. Here is our clay on this side of the soil triangle right there, going from 0 up to 100. And I have 30%, so I'll make a dot right at 30% right there. And for my clay, I follow the contours horizontally straight across to the right. So I'm going to draw a line right on that 30% line. Now I got 20% silt. Well, look at my silt side. This is my silt side right here. And look, this counts from 0 to 100 up this way, from 0 to 100. Well, I got 20%, so I'm going to put a dot at my 20% right there. And look at my arrow. This one goes down and to the left. So I follow my contour line down and to the left right there. Finally, I got 50% sand. Just quick note, notice how all of these add up to 100%. If you got something that adds up to like 120%, you screwed up and the soil triangle won't work. All these should add up to 100. I got 50% sand, so look at my sand side right here. Well, that counts up this way from 0 to 100. I got 50% right there. And I'm going to follow, this one tells me I need to go up and to the left, so I follow my contour up and to the left. And where all those points intersect, boom, right there, that is your soil type. And so my soil type for here would fall into the sandy, clay, loam category. So that is a skill that you will need to have. You'll need to be able to do that. And we did practice it in the lab. Okay, let me clear this out. Let me keep us going here. These soil types are significant because they have different properties, excuse me. So moving on here, we have these 4 general categories over here. The clays, the silt, the sands, and the loams. So notice in the middle here, we have all these loams. Loam basically just means a mixture. Like it's these different combinations. So if you have a mixture of soil, you have a loam. Most of your questions, it's easiest to ask questions about sand and clay, because those are the extremes of soil. Loam is kind of this medium, and it has decent properties of all of them. But for right now, I just want to focus on clay and sand because they're the extremes. Clay is the smallest particles, sand is the largest particles. And for that reason, their properties are the inverse of each other. They're the exact opposite of each other. First, let's look at our nutrient holding capacity. So this is the ability of a soil to hold on to nutrients, to not allow nutrients to leach out of the soil. And clay is really good at that. Clay is excellent at not allowing soils to lose their nutrients. And if we look at sand, sand is really bad at that. If we consider the next thing, which is porosity, see my son in the background there, porosity, the ability for water to pass through it, clay does not let water pass through it. I mean, think about the clay that you like work with in art class. That is actually soil. Like clay is, that clay is naturally occurring. There are parts of the world that just have these like natural pure clays. And think about, as a soil, how dense that soil is, how compact it is. It would not be very good at allowing water to seep into it. but it's excellent at holding water. So like if you have a ball of clay that's wet, that ball of clay will stay wet. It will hang on to that moisture very, very well, but it can also just compact and get so dense that water wouldn't pass through it very well. That the aeration would be very poor because of how dense it is. There's like no air bubbles in clay. It's so thick. And then the workability, think of it from a poor farmer's perspective, trying to like till the soil, dig it up. Think about how heavy that clay would be, how difficult it would be to shovel because it's so wet, so saturated, so heavy with no air in it that it would be very difficult to turn. While sand would be the opposite. Sand is not going to hold on to nutrients well because the water is going to pass right through it. And as the water passes through it, the nutrients are going to be dissolved in the water, and that those nutrients are going to leach right out of the soil and right away from the plants. The porosity is great. Water can pass through sand no problem at all. Like think about when if you go to the beach or something, if you just like filled up a jar full of sand or something and poured some water on it, the water would pass right through that sand because it has such large particles and it's so well aerated. There's a lot of space for that water to move down and through. And because of that, it doesn't hold water well. So these two are always going to be the same. Nutrient holding and water holding are always going to be the same. If you can't hold water, you can't hold nutrients because that water is going to pass right through and take the nutrients with it. If you are very porous, as sand is, you're going to be very well aerated. It's porous because there are air spaces in between it that allow the water to seep through. So porosity and aeration are always going to kind of be the same thing, have the same properties. So clay and sand are our extremes of soil, the exact opposite there. And then silt is kind of like in between, and it's just kind of like medium for everything. And loam is kind of medium for everything too. This is why farmers like loam soil. You can't have pure sand. Sure, sand is easy for a farmer to work, easy for them to turn over. That's good. Plenty of oxygen in the soil. That's good. Allows the water to pass through. But it's so bad at holding water and nutrients that nothing's going to grow. Clay has some good properties. It'll hold on to those nutrients great. It'll hold on to that water really well. You wouldn't need to irrigate very much, but you still wouldn't be able to grow anything because those roots wouldn't have any space to grow, be no oxygen in there. The water wouldn't seep down into it very well. So farmers, they can't work with just pure clay or sand. They want a combination, something that is pretty good at holding water and is pretty porous and is all right at holding at water holding capacity, pretty well aerated, and is workable. You can like turn it over. So that's why farmers like soil. It has good enough properties from all these different soil components that it promotes plant growth the best. This is an excellent table to have copied down. I strongly recommend that you write down this table here. It will be very useful to you. Next thing, we are getting into soil horizons. If you were to dig a very deep hole, you would see layers of soil. And these different layers have different properties. And you can see them pretty clearly here. Look at this dark, rich layer right there. And then you see this lighter layer right in there. And then this bottom layer here looks like it's got some rock bits down in there. And then this is actually water there. So it looks like there's more layers down there, but that's actually just water reflecting. Depending on where you are, the layers will be different sizes and have slightly different characteristics. But these are what are called our soil horizons, these different layers. And these are the layers that you need to know. The O, A, B, C, and R layers. In diagrams, sometimes you'll see reference to an E layer. This is called an eluvial layer, and you can kind of see it right here in between the dark layer and this light one. that's not a layer that we're going to concern ourselves with. So if you see that in a diagram, don't worry about that one. That's not one of our focuses. These 5 layers are the ones I need you to know about. So what are the properties of these layers? Our top layer is the O layer. The O actually stands for something. It stands for organic. And so this is what's referred to as like humus, not the dip, not hummus, not the chickpea thing, humus. And this is like, whoops, this is like partially decomposed organic matter. So think of like leaf litter or needle, pine needles, things like that, that are not fully decomposed yet. If you were to go for a walk in Rock Creek Park right now, you would see a nice rich O layer because all the leaves have fallen. They have begun to decompose, but they're not fully decomposed yet. So this is stuff that will become like fully broken down soil, but it's not there yet. Next, we have our A layers. And just before we go, the A, B, and C layers, A, B, and C don't stand for anything. Just, just letters of the alphabet. Our A layer can be referred to as topsoil. And this is very rich in organic matter. It's fully decomposed organic matter. So things in the O layer will become the A layer. Just give it a little more time. So this is because this is where, like, the plants and animals and fungi die and decompose up here at the top. That's why the A layer is very rich in organic nutrients. And this is where we find a lot of our nitrogen and phosphorus because there's so much decomposition that goes on down here. This is where we see the most soil biota, the worms and the microbes and things, because they feed on organic matter. So that's our topsoil, and it's really important for soil fertility because it's so rich in those organic nutrients that are essential for plant growth. The B layer is called the subsoil, and that's going to be rich in inorganic nutrients. A lot of those earth metals, iron, calcium, magnesium, magnesium, you guys just said magnesium, potassium, things like that. Things that come from that parent material exist in this B layer. So it's important that plants the root deeply, because the deeper plants' roots get, they can be able to access nutrients from the A layer, but then they can also get down into that B layer where you might have richer contents of like iron, which are also really important. Then you get into the C layer, and that's partially weathered rock material. These are going to have like chunks of rocks. And as they break down, as they continue to weather, that C layer starts to become the B layer. But those rocks are not fully broken down yet. Much like the O layer, the organic matter isn't fully broken down, so it's not the A layer yet. The C layer isn't fully weathered, so it's not like the B layer yet. They will continue to weather as water seeps down in here that might be slightly acidic to do some chemical weathering. The weight on top might grind it a little bit. There might be some like subsurface erosion that will smooth out those rocks, grind up those rocks a little bit, and they'll continue to weather. And finally, the R layer, R actually does stand for something, stands for rock, I think, or you can in your head just have it stand for rock. And that's just solid bedrock. That's unweathered rock. So one more thing to go through these. So we got to know all these layers. The organic matter, the organic nutrients are up here at the top from the decomposing organic matter. And those organic nutrients are leached downwards as rainfall or as water infiltrates through. It will dissolve those nutrients and seep them down. The better your soil is at holding water, at holding nutrients, the less leaching you will have. So, but those organic nutrients are pulled downward. The inorganic nutrients from the bedrock material can actually migrate upwards. And that's sort of difficult to imagine, but what I'd like you to imagine this whole soil column was saturated with water. So I'm going to do a little drawing here. Imagine there was like a big rainfall and this all got totally saturated with water, soaked. Well, we have down here at the bottom in the C layer, in the B layer, wherever, we have down low, we have those inorganic nutrients like, let's say, iron, like, let's say, calcium. And these are ions that can be dissolved in the water. And if this area is saturated, as the water gets saturated, as the soil, excuse me, gets saturated, they are able to diffuse upwards because these ions will always go from areas of high concentration to low concentration. There's low concentrations of iron up here. And so if the soil is saturated, it allows these minerals to move upward into the soil column. So kind of like the sweet spot of soil is right in here, because this is where you're going to have that combination of organic nutrients and inorganic nutrients. That interface between the A layer and the B layer is where you're going to have really rich nutrients. But again, as I mentioned, like the deeper your roots go, the more of these nutrients any given plant would be able to access. So having deep roots is very helpful for plant growth. All right. Almost there. One more slide, I think. Yes. These are soil types in different biomes. And notice I'm not being the biomes are not too specific. I got desert, that's specific, but then temperate and tropical. And the difference between these is the amount of rainfall. So desert, of course, gets the least amount of rainfall. Temperate areas get a moderate amount of rainfall, and tropical areas get the most amount of rainfall. So there are a few things that are good to note about these different soils. In deserts, because there's so little rainfall, there's very little plant growth. And that means that there can't really be an O layer, because the O layer is made of organic matter. But in a desert, if nothing's growing or very little is growing, then there's no organic matter. So deserts really won't have much of an O layer, and will have a very small A layer that builds up over a very long period of time, the slow growth of these plants and animals dying and decomposing. The minerals will accumulate in that B horizon. Rainfall, deserts will get very sporadic rainfall, and when that rain does fall, those inorganic nutrients will be able to migrate upwards into the B horizon. So it's got a real thick B horizon here, really a non-existent O layer because of the lack of organic matter, very thin A layer because, again, of that very little organic matter. Now in temperate soil, you do have enough plant growth. So you do see that O layer there. And you see a nice rich A layer. But because there's a moderate amount of rainfall, you have a fair amount of leaching that goes down. It pulls those nutrients down in there. Remember that E layer that I talked about? There's the eluvial layer. We're not too worried about it. These are called alpha sol soils. These are, by the way, called aridisol soils. I'm not going to use those words anymore, but whatever. So an O layer does form, and then the less soluble materials, they're going to start to accumulate in that B horizon. So you want to have deep roots there because those nutrients are going to be leaching downwards towards the B horizon there. So it's good to have those deep roots to chase those nutrients down. But you get the temperate soils is where you see the most defined soil profiles, very clear O, A, B, and C layer. Tropical soils are interesting because you would think, well, there's so much organic material there that you must have like a real big O layer, and it must be like really nutrient rich soils in excuse me, in the tropics. In fact, you don't really have an O layer, and that's because things decompose so quickly. The rate of decomposition is so high in the tropical soils that you don't really, that the O layer never really accumulates. Also notice how small the A layer is. There's a fair amount of, because of all the rainfall, fair amount of topsoil erosion in the tropics, but also the A layer gets essentially kind of like those nutrients get sucked up. You would think tropical soils, well, they must be the most nutrient rich because look at the plant life they support. If you were to take a soil sample from the tropical rainforest from the Amazon, you would find almost no nutrients in it at all. And that's because those nutrients have all been sucked up by the plants. The competition for the nutrients is so fierce that once a nutrient is in the soil, it gets sucked up by a plant right away. And so you actually see very nutrient depleted soils because it's all locked up in the vegetation. The percolating rainfall, because it rains so much, the soluble minerals get pulled down, 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 and only those less soluble ones like iron and aluminum, which are not as water soluble, they start to accumulate in the B layer, which is like really big. So you get this massive B layer that's left over because of all the leaching downwards, all the uptake from the plants, the very rapid rate of decomposition. So you get a very unusual soil profile in the tropics because of that. All right, big takeaways here. Deserts and tropics don't really get an O layer, but for very different reasons. Fast rate of decomposition and uptake here, and no organic matter over here. Nutrient depleted, but for very different reasons. This has very little nutrients because there's so little organic matter. This has very little nutrients because there's so much leaching and such a rapid rate of uptake that the nutrients never really get an opportunity to accumulate in the soil. All right, that is our slideshow for today. Take notes on it, and you will have your quiz on either Thursday or Friday. See ya.